What is the worst thing that's happened at a high school reunion party that you attended? My sister, my now husband, and I were all in the same graduating class, plus my husband's best friend. Best friend's name is something like John Smith. Very common. He was very popular in high school. Super nice guy, stood out in a crowd. If you didn't know him, you certainly knew of him, even in a massive school. So anyway, the 20-year reunion rolls around. My sister is the only one who wanted to go. She called right after, very upset. Apparently, there was a huge memorial wall for John Smith, who had just died. None of us knew. Awful. My husband was like, but we just saw him? Called him up and was like, hey dude, are you dead? No, not dead. Surprised, but not dead. Anyway, it turned out to be the much less popular other John Smith was the one who died. They made a lovely memorial for the wrong guy, who was forgotten totally. We still run into people to this day who see him and are like, hey, aren't you supposed to be dead? So right off the bat, we have a classic example of why would you give your kid such a basic, easily confusable name with someone else that countless people are bound out there to have? Now, I'm not saying like go off the wall and start naming your kids after Game of Thrones characters or anything like that, but like if your last name is Smith, you gotta get a little bit more creative than naming your son John or Michael, you know what I mean? Like, come on. Story 2. My 10-year reunion ended itself before it happened. Turns out, our class president, traditionally in charge of organizing, took a hard turn into a footloose character after high school. Edit. Originally said she took a hard turn for the evangelical. Several commenters objected to me lumping this brand of crazy into evangelism, for which I apologize. Highlights of her event planning include no alcohol allowed, not even BYOB. A few classmates in a reasonably successful band offered to play for free. She was adamant there would be no music or dancing. Plus ones were to be spouses only. 2 guys happily told her they'd bring their husbands, and she kicked them both from the Facebook page. The venue was on the high school soccer field in Iowa in August. We were welcome to bring our own chairs. A few people offered to bring beanbags and bocce and similar games. She said no, because it would make the reunion, quote, too much like tailgating. Suggested entertainment was a guided tour of the school, which had undergone zero change since we graduated. Catering was from Hy-Vee, which is a grocery store. Their food is actually okay, but tickets were $60. It was ultimately canceled because out of our class of 300, less than 10 people bought tickets. Edit. Wow, that's a lot of comments. Okay, FAQ. This was eastern Iowa, Cedar Rapids / Iowa City region, which makes the sudden footloose morals all the weirder. It's a pretty liberal area. I cast no judgment on Hy-Vee catering. Put down the pitchforks. Their food is good, just not $60 worth of good. I sadly couldn't come up with the name of the band, short of messaging dudes I haven't talked to in 20 years. Looks like they haven't been active in quite a while. A bunch of people who stayed local did indeed pick a bar and a Saturday night to meet up, and had much amoral debauchery. Rumor has it that there was even karaoke. It makes a good story, but I'm ultimately sad for our event planner. I got the impression that she really needed everyone to see that she was the most good person who was doing everything right, and that she hadn't been in control of something in a long, long time. I hope she's doing better now. Story 3. The people who were supposed to plan our high school reunion dropped the ball, so I figured it wouldn't happen. But then this other dude from our high school stepped up to plan it. He was in a graduate program and also working part-time at a banquet hall. And he said that his boss would give us the banquet hall space for free. It was a really nice gesture, and he seemed really into it. He had been miserable in high school. Grumpy, sullen, unpleasant, mean to other people. He came out in college, so maybe the weight of having to keep it a secret was part of why he was so unpleasant. Maybe he'd be more fun now. I was working a crap job and had no savings at the time, so I was neither interested in having my former classmates pity me, nor was I gunning to shell out a lot of money to attend. Plus, my crappy ex might be there, and that didn't feel worth it. The organizer made a Facebook event and asked people to Venmo him the cost of admission prior to attending. He wanted something like $15 to $20 a head. I can't remember. Anyway, it didn't really feel worth paying for. Maybe if there would be some drinks included or something, I would go for an hour. I sent him a private message asking what the admission ticket covered. Food? Drinks? The space was free, after all. He posted publicly on the Facebook page that if the cost of admission was too steep, quote, message me and we can work out some financial aid. What? I then publicly posted, asking what the admission cost covered. No response. Other people asked too. He said it would go towards having a bartender and server dedicated to the event space, as well as towards food. Okay, fair. Folks, he was the server. My friend showed up having not yet paid him, and he barred her entry. The people who had paid the admission cost showed up to an empty banquet hall, were given a menu by their former classmate, and told to order their own food and drink from him. He pocketed the admission money as his fee. After an hour, he brought out one grocery store sheet cake for 75 people to share. That was it. Okay, so it's pretty obvious here that this guy was kind of a con man from the jump. Lesson learned, I guess? I mean, I don't know. I hope that cake was good. Story 4. Not mine, but my husband's. 10-year anniversary for high school graduates. The whole thing was really just sloppily slapped together, and it was pretty clear the class was not interested in getting together. The gathering place kept changing every couple of weeks. This was updated via Facebook group, by the way. At first, it was renting a place and getting food catered and whatnot. Except it's pretty typical in my town for most people not to go on to be successful by any means. So asking mostly unemployed or minimum wage workers to cough up, I think, $200 to attend just didn't work out. Venues kept downgrading to accommodate until they got down to having a bonfire out by the lake, BYOB, no fee, just come hang out for like an hour or something. Throughout the fiasco of finding a venue, a majority of the class declined going. Some had to change status. There was a good handful still marked as going, but with everything changing and people obviously starting to tune out midway through, a lot of people forgot to change their status of going to not going. 2 people showed up. That was it. One was my brother, who had nothing better to do anyway. Another guy that sort of helped put the crap show together showed up. The gal that set the whole thing up was pretty mad about it, and the rando dude that helped posted a long rant on the Facebook about how awful people were and how they should have appreciated the efforts it took just to hold the pathetic gathering. My husband had me sit and flip through the page after everything was said and done. It was pretty obvious the gal was in serious denial the entire time, despite it being pretty clear nobody wanted anything to do with the event. I laughed at the rant, then honestly forgot about it until I saw this thread. Edit. I failed to mention my brother and husband were in the same year. They were buddies throughout high school, college, and even now. I'm just a little younger, hence why I was not part of the reunion and my brother was. And no, husband refused to go to the reunion because clicking through Facebook profiles was enough to check on people he had any curiosity about. Plus, we had just moved states right around this time, so traveling was not on our list of to-do anytime soon. Story 5. So far, it was the only thing that happened at my high school reunion. 10th reunion. Graduating class of plus or minus 850. Well-funded high school. Every class has a trust fund to fund reunions. A good friend of mine was our treasurer and organized it via Facebook. We started big. Ballroom, setting for 1,000, figured spouses, etc. A year out, lots of interest. Definitely not 1,000 people interest, and started to scale back. 6 months out, less interest. Lots of people reconnected via Facebook and lost the drive to actually care. Scaled back more. 3 months out was deadlines for attendance. The school's alumni association would dispense the funds based on class size and allotment for the milestone. We hadn't put a deposit down because the target kept moving on attendance. 2 months out, my friend finalizes and does a formal cutoff. She had kept taking anything for a month due to lack of interest. Day of, it's at a local bar. Not a small bar either. Good food, rented the entire place for a Friday night at that. 25-ish alumni showed out of 150 RSVPs. With spouses or whatever, was around 40 people. That was the worst part, is knowing so few people actually gave a crap. But the best part was the treasurer's smirk the entire night. The school had allotted $50 per person for this. $50 per person plus guests. $15,000 with instructions to pay everything fully. We drank and ate our asses off to the point of almost being Roman, and the bill was $7,500 between food and rental. She paid the bill, then handed everyone $100 from the envelope, and then handed the rest of the envelope to the manager and was like, here's the tip. So roughly $3,000 for the wait staff and crew. Pretty memorable and honestly not that big of a bummer, but holy crap, people just don't care. Yeah, I think social media has a lot to do with this. Things like Facebook and Instagram, like you open your phone and you see these people every day anyway, even though it's not in person. So I think that the thought or the allure of a reunion and seeing how people have changed and hearing about their lives, it doesn't exist anymore because you still interact with them all the time. Story 6. 10-year reunion invite came up and I thought, yeah, this looks like it could be fun. I noticed the venue is a fancy restaurant. Disappointed, expecting some sort of party. Room is very limited. For a class of over 100, you would think they'd have picked a venue with over 25 capacity. I start reaching out to all the friends I've kept in touch with. Not one of them is even remotely interested in going. My old high school best friend suggests we catch up at his and drink instead. Haven't seen him in years, so I bail on the reunion. Turns out almost no one went. One of the girls that organized the thing was begging my mate to go because she was so embarrassed how little people had RSVP'd. She ended up bailing herself. Turns out, for the 10 people that actually went, half of which organized it, they had to be split up, since they booked a place that was not intended for large groups of people. Unironically, the same group that organized it took it upon themselves to organize our end-of-school formal, Aussie for prom. They decided for themselves that we didn't want to go with the original plan and completely replanned it without really consulting the general student body. So many people bailed on it that they had to start inviting ex-students, dropped out, changed schools, expelled, take some real crap to get expelled from a Catholic school in Australia, just to meet the minimum capacity the venue required to move forward with the date. Honestly, I know they meant well, but this group ruined the formal for a lot of people. I don't know why I expected anything good from their reunion. Apparently, the after party was wild. Someone almost got thrown off the boat, literally into the water at 2 in the morning, and a guy we know copped a chicken in the eye. Edit. Well, this blew up. Thank you all. To answer a few questions a lot of you have asked, he woke up the next day and sat up without opening his eyes. He had been sleeping on the floor and someone was standing over him with his chicken out. Why was it hard? I don't know. I don't want to know, lol. The after party was of the formal, and the after party is called the kick-ons. I'm sure the restaurant could have catered to 10 people. I assume some rocked up unannounced. If you get expelled from a Catholic school, at least in Australia, you cannot attend any other Catholic school. My school, at least, were hesitant to expel as a result. They had told us this, but I can't remember if it was because they wanted to keep kids in Catholic schools or if it was because we were preparing for the HSC, Aussie version of finals. Story 7. Small college reunion with my core group of friends from university. This was about 5 years after graduation. We all partied pretty hard in school, but mellowed out in our late 20s. Decided to all meet up for dinner at a local bar/restaurant. Think Applebee's, but nicer. One guy showed up already wasted, with a duffel bag full of multiple packets of weed and the bottle he started on before meeting us. He decided we were boring, finished his bottle in the restroom, and refused to come out. He ended up passing out in there. Bartender kicked him out. He came alone in an Uber, and we had no idea where he lived. None of us wanted to take him to our places. He was hungry, puking, and belligerent, so we dropped him off at his last known address, his parents' house. Both of them answered the door, and we handed him over. It was past midnight and incredibly awkward. He's not invited to the next reunion. Story 8. Went to my high school reunion. I honestly don't know why I did. The friends I kept in touch with, well, I kept in touch with. But one friend managed to convince me otherwise, and so I went. The reunion wasn't bad. It was mostly people trying their best to one-up each other in their bid to look successful. I sat down at a table next to my friend where I was actually enjoying my time catching up with long-forgotten acquaintances. During the reunion, there were 2 people who stood out the most. There was a chick that I barely recognized. My friend and I kept asking each other if she was in our graduating class or a spouse of one. Found out later that she spent close to $80,000 for cosmetic surgery, hence being unidentifiable. She was so proud of herself that nobody was able to recognize her. Seriously, she could have been a candidate on Botched, but who was I to pop her bubble? The other was a guy who was so snooty back in high school. We're talking the cliche, if your address wasn't within a certain neighborhood, you weren't good enough to acknowledge, kind of snobbery. Well, he arrived late for the dinner portion and all the seats in his old friend's table were already taken, so he sullenly sat down with the likes of us. Yikes. Having to sit with people you look down on all your teenage life? This poor man. So I took pity on him because most of the people at the table probably remembered his attitude as well and ignored him. I started asking him questions of how he's fared since graduation, etc. This is our conversation while the DJ was blasting music and others were yelling over the din to be heard within their own chats. Me. So what are you doing now, snob? The name of the guy was changed to protect the innocent. Snob. I work at Smith & Smith attorney law firm. Not a real company, but you get the gist. Me. Oh, that's impressive. Are you a lawyer? Studying to be a lawyer? Snob. No, I'm working on it. Me. Oh, articling at your law firm? Snob. No. Me. You work at Smith & Smith, so what exactly is it that you do? Movie moment. I kid you not. The DJ cut the music so that the MC could make the announcement that dinner was to be served shortly. But before that happened, Snob got frustrated with all my questions and stated loudly into the unexpected silence, "I'm a mailroom clerk." Everyone stared, and hate to say this, accidental justice was served. Snob was taken down a peg or two by his own hands. Story 9. At my 10-year high school reunion, we had a decent turnout, maybe 100 plus people. We were at a pretty nice hotel banquet hall. There was one guy I had known all through high school, and he was a well-known stoner. I'll call him Chris for this story. I see Chris walk into the banquet hall, hop in his tracks, turn around in a very slow 360-degree circle, surveying the entire room. He just says, "Whoa," and he looks visibly alarmed. He stops and his eyes settle on me. I say, "Hey Chris, long time no see, man." He kind of slides over to me and whispers in my ear, "This is really weird. I'm pretty sure I know every single person in this room." And that's when I realize he's wearing the same clothes as all the banquet hall workers. Oh my god, Chris is working as a server at his own high school reunion and he has no clue what's happening. I walk him out to the front lobby and explain it's our 10-year high school reunion. He's mortified, beyond embarrassed. He was never contacted and didn't even realize it had been 10 years since we graduated. He just knew he was working another catering gig in a never-ending series of catering gigs. I make him take me to his manager. I explain what's happening and tell the manager there's no way this guy is working his own high school reunion. Awesomely, the manager agrees. We find a different suit jacket and tie for him, and I take Chris back to the party. He ended up having a good night. Okay, so a couple things here. What are the odds, A, that this guy is not contacted? He's like apparently one of the few people that was not contacted for this reunion, but then also he happens to be working a catering job that also happens to be catering his 10-year reunion. So that's kind of a weird serendipitous story, but glad he was able to salvage it and have a good time. Story 10. This was not my reunion, but my husband's. In high school, my husband was, and still is, a very reserved and quiet person. He tolerates no BS, though. I call him my John Wayne. He is also 6 years older than I am. We arrive at the venue, and everyone is mingling. All of a sudden, a woman calls out my husband's name and runs over. He introduces me, and she loses her ever-loving mind. Apparently, she had been in love with him since elementary school, but hadn't ever said anything, and she planned on asking him on a date that night. She has no idea he was married or that his wife, me, was 7 months pregnant. She bursts into tears and starts yelling at me incoherently. Turns out she's living with bipolar disorder and was also an addict at that time, which is why she reacted that way. We still chose to leave less than 20 minutes of arriving, though. Story 11. Can't say it's the worst thing, just a general observation. My class has been excellent about having reunions every 5 years. Our 8th installment is not too far off. They're very well attended and enjoyable. One thing I noticed is that as the reunions go by, the folks who have been putting on a show for appearance sake give fewer and fewer Fs as the years pile up. You can see who's been ravaged by years of drug or alcohol abuse. The ones who have let themselves go physically, I'm not talking about being a few pounds overweight. Some folks put in no effort to be hygienic in general. Then there are people who realize too late that when you treat people like crap, no one wants to be around you anymore. There are crap talkers and big deals from high school who kept it going through the first few reunions. New cars talking about their big houses and endless vacations, they don't talk crap anymore. They've maxed out their credit cards long ago and live life on borrowed time and money. Some have just given up, and you can see it. I found that to be profoundly sad. We're all too young to do that. On the other hand, I see some old friends with a regular cadence. We catch up, get the lowdown on each other's families, and talk fondly about a 4-year stretch of time that happened long ago. Story 12. I was one of the first recipients of an alumni scholarship from the class of 1999, and for their 20th reunion, the guy who organized the scholarship reached out and asked me to come as his guest to give a speech encouraging people to donate. I live about an hour away now, but I felt pressured and thought, sure, after all, I got the benefit, why not pay it forward? He also pressured me into making a symbolic donation of $10. That's not nothing to me. Wrote a speech, practiced, wrote note cards. Show up at this hotel, and the party is in the front lounge, swarming with people 10 years older than me. I find the guy, he starts introducing me and explaining what I do now, but he gets it wrong every time. Ask him when I'm gonna speak. He says later and tells me to enjoy the food. It's all meat. I don't eat that. Disappears. By random happenstance, in this sea of people having, a reunion, I run into a guy who worked for my old community theater. I cling desperately to him so that I'm not alone. He probably wants to, reune, but instead he's talking to me for an hour. Find the guy, ask him when I'm going to speak. He says soon. I ask where I'm going to speak. I've just realized there's no stage and the party is spread all over the lobby. He points to where the DJ is and where everyone's pictures from high school are playing on a screen. Excellent backdrop, slideshow of memories behind a girl no one knows or particularly cares about. Another hour passes. It's time for the group picture. Everyone herds over. I stay nearby to be ready. I'm among the spouses, girlfriends, and boyfriends. They ask who I'm there with. I say I'm giving a speech. They ask when, and I say soon. At an adjacent party, a band starts playing. V loud. People are shouting to be heard. It dawns on me that I may not give my speech. I go find the guy, ask, smirking, when I'm going to give my speech. He says, utterly guileless, that it looks like I don't have to. But he hopes I had fun. I get home at midnight from someone else's high school reunion with my unused speech in my purse. Haven't heard from him since. Can't believe people want to read what I would have said. I cobbled it together from memory. I don't mean to brag, but I kind of killed it in high school. I was a National Merit Scholar, I had the lead in all the musicals, I was in show choir, and I never took a regular class if there was an AP offered. That's why I got the scholarship. I applied for everyone I could, and because I was exemplary in everything I did, I got plenty of them. But when I got to college, for the first time, I started to flounder. I struggled in some classes, and I took that really hard. That, coupled with the loneliness I felt, made my first semester away from home much harder than anything I'd done. Thankfully, with scholarships both from high school and college, the one thing I didn't have to worry about was money. That was one pressure that I was spared, and every bit of pressure matters when you're trying to adjust to college. But scholarships can be about more than just the financial impact. For me, they were a vote of confidence, and a reminder of what my teachers and community thought of me, not just as a student, but as a person. That scholarship was a gift that said, we've seen what you can do, and we want to help you do more. The dollar amount wasn't the highest, sure, but it was a safety net when I needed it. And it was a reminder for me, when I was having some low times, that I had done well before, and I could do that again. So tonight, I want to encourage you to donate to the fund, to keep that scholarship going. I've actually already donated. It was $10, which is going to buy some kid in the class of 2020 maybe an eighth of a textbook if they buy it secondhand. But that $10 adds up, and that message gets louder and louder with every donation. We've seen what you can do, and we want to help you do more. Give that vote of confidence to someone who's about to head off on their own, and take it from me. They'll be very grateful. Story 13. Never attended one, mostly because of this. I must have been only a year out of college when I get an invite to a Facebook group that someone wants to put on our first class, 230 or so classmates, reunion in a Midwest town. The class president says go for it, but he's on one of the coasts and can't attend or contribute to planning. Fine. Organizers poll the group and most people generally in favor. Sounds good. They schedule it for Thanksgiving weekend. A month or so out, we start getting group updates. They aren't going to charge an entry fee, but they will be charging somewhere around $7 to $10 per cup for the kegs of Busch Light. Memory is spotty. They're going to rent a place to hold it. Then they're going to use a classmate's parent space for free. A few other random changes, nothing drastic, but I saw who was planning to attend, and at that point I decided I wasn't really interested in catching up. Most of my good friends were in the grade above me anyway, so I clicked the not attending event button, but still get the group updates. The week of Thanksgiving, we get this message that there is no venue, no kegs, but show up at this particular town bar. Then, the night of, I'm hanging out with my sister when someone texts me to check the group feed. It's exploding with comments from the same 4 people calling everyone bullcrap fake personalities. They were the only 4 who showed up for the night. Not even the organizers bothered to attend. And that's when I decided I didn't need to attend a future reunion. My boyfriend went to high school with a class of 30 and keeps in some form of contact with approximately 100% of them, so I think small schools have some perks. Story 14. My 10-year and my husband's 10-year were both the same weekend. We decided to do his because it was well organized and looked like fun, plus we hadn't been back there in quite some time. They hired a little party boat to cruise around a lake for 2 hours. Prior to that, they had a meetup across from the lake for lunch and a happy hour bar hop. The festivity started around noon. Boarding was at 10, and everything was supposed to be over at midnight, except those that wanted to do an after party. Problem 1. The lake they picked was 45 minutes away from the area they all lived. People had to find their own rides, which was a bit of an issue since many didn't have vehicles. Eventually, most people that wanted to come were able to carpool. However, a couple cars were pulled over on the way because they had been pre-gaming and shouldn't have been driving, or the passengers were throwing empties out on the highway. Yes, this was in the middle of the afternoon. Problem 2. Lunch and happy hour were the responsibility of the individuals. Not everyone believed they should pay, so some people ran up tabs in the name of the school's class of 2005 reunion and then ghosted. The restaurant and bars got super angry and started stopping any patrons that said they were there for a reunion and held them till the cops came, even though some of these people didn't add to the tabs. We, thankfully, had arrived late because we had a dinner with some of his friends and only went to the last bar on the list. We had already paid for the drinks we had, so we dipped before they rounded us up too. I heard eventually some of those places were trying to sue the school to get their money. Next, the boat. It wasn't huge. It had a main enclosed area, a small deck on both the front and back connected by a very narrow single-file gangway on either side of the boat, an even smaller standing-only area on the roof, maybe 3 people at a time, and a small sub-level that was strictly off-limits. There was one bathroom for each gender. Everyone upon boarding was already pretty tipsy. The cruise was split up, so the first 30 minutes were like a where are they now, in memoriam, pub quiz thing, etc. Then an hour was unlimited drinks and snacks with dancing and mingling. The snacks were baked goods and had been carried from venue to venue and were frosted in a vibrant blue, the school color. The drinks were bright pink. I'm pretty sure it was like pink lemonade powder, Sprite, and cheap vodka. Anyway, things started off a little awkwardly because the MC was one of those that was stopped for drunk driving. The second in command was held up at the bar, and the third person was already vomiting bright blue and pink over the side of the boat. Eventually, someone kicked it off and only fumbled about the dead people. Bad jokes that no one laughed about, so they got mad and quit. People then found a boombox, turned on music, and started mingling, and eating more baked goods. We never touched them because I have celiac disease. Suddenly, a ton of people started getting sick. I'm talking like 30 of roughly 70 people. Not only were they puking, but it was coming out both ends for some. Remember, there was only one restroom for each gender? Yeah, nightmare. We were at the furthest point on the lake by then, so it was going to take a while to get back. It was a mess. People were throwing up in whatever they could find, messing their pants or trying to find a corner. The captain only had one person on board trying to help, but it was a losing battle. Since that was in the enclosed space, the rest of us tried hanging out on the decks to try and get away from the smell and the noise, so we're all scrunched together. I had gotten separated from my husband, but was chatting with people I'd met earlier through him, when a guy came up and started being like, I don't remember your name, but I'd never forget your beautiful face, kind of thing. Jokingly, I was pretending to be shocked and said we'd been in the same classes since kindergarten, and we even dated in junior high, etc. The people I talked to were playing along, all saying they're surprised he doesn't remember me, that I was even prom queen. The guy says he's going to get us all apology drinks and then disappears. By then, my husband found us and brought more drinks and is telling us about this guy that's bragging to everyone who will listen about how he's taking home this hot chick. We all just kind of laughed it off, saying several other people said something similar about their spouses too. Drank the drinks and started dancing because someone brought the boombox outside. While my husband is grinding on me, out of nowhere, the guy from before materializes and starts telling my husband to get off his woman. He then grabs me and is saying something about finding a place of our own when we're all yelling at him that it's my husband and he needs to back off. The guy puffs up like he's going to swing, then goes weirdly quiet and apologizes, says no hard feelings, and passes out the drinks. It was pretty awkward, so he disappears again. I have a couple sips and go back to dancing for a bit when I start to feel funny. I tell everyone I need to get some air and start walking down the side of the boat where there's less people. Then I start feeling really dizzy and nauseated. I saw a girl pop out from the enclosure further down, and I remember saying something was wrong. But she didn't seem to hear before disappearing. I was trying to use the railing to stay upright and walk back, when who should appear but drunk creepy guy. He said something I don't really remember, but his face was so scary. I'll never forget that face. I turned away from him and almost fell over the railing because my body was not cooperating. He started pulling me by my arms down the boat to where the entrance to the sublevel was, and I was basically a rag doll. I could hardly move. The last thing I remember thinking was that I should grab something or yell something, but nothing was working properly. I believe I passed out right around then. It's really lucky I did, because they think that going full dead weight caused him to stumble, fall, and hit the back of his head, knocking him out. When I came to, I was inside a hospital. The girl that I saw went to find someone who knew me, and when they found me, the guy was bleeding from his head and I was turning blue. I was having seizures and had choked on my own vomit. The hospital told me I was drugged with GHB. They wound up keeping me an entire day because I was also covered in hives and they weren't sure why. The creep also went to the hospital for some serious damage to his face and crotch that occurred before the police arrived. And over half the people on the boat had contracted norovirus from suspected contaminated baked goods. Creep was eventually charged with a whole host of things, pleaded down, was sentenced to 18 months, and only wound up serving about 9 weeks because of overcrowding. If he hadn't been allowed to plead down a couple felony charges, he would have been in prison for 50 years, supposedly. So that's the criminal justice system for you. Basically, I'll never attend any kind of reunion again, and I avoid going back there whenever possible. Story 15. My friend pissed in the stairwell that led downstairs to the main floor of the restaurant. I was seated next to the woman who had cheated on her boyfriend, then husband, now divorced, with me over a several-year span, and he sat right next to her. They chose the seats intentionally, too. It's not like it was assigned seating. He also knew it had happened. I ended up drunkenly buying the whole table shots in my guilt-ridden stupor. My girlfriend finally shows up when I'm completely butt-housed, has to take me home, and I end up sleeping at her parents' house in the guest bedroom. It was actually really fun. I do remember at one point the girl that put it together was making a speech to all of us, and mentioned how astonished she was that one of the smarter kids in our graduating class, quote, just works as a bank teller now. He was there, right in front of her. Yeah, but everyone got DEF CON 1 level hammered and roamed around downtown Colorado Springs all night. Good crap. Story 16. The reunion started in front of my high school. Teachers were also present. A guy came drunk and wanted to settle things with people, students or teachers, who bullied him or mistreated him in high school. From his point of view, I only heard/witnessed some of the events back in high school, so I cannot say if everything is true. Let's just say it was awkward. One example of his behavior that day. One of my best friends asked him, "Hey XYZ, long time no see. How are you doing? What are you doing in life?" His reply, "I make more money than you." He was always kind of an a-hole, not to me, going as far as calling his girlfriend, quote, my meat, while most a-holes from my high school grew up and became decent human beings, from the little interactions I had with him. I think he never got over the pain he received in high school. He's still very bitter, and there's still a lot of hatred in him. So I didn't even really think that this was a thing until reading this post. Do teachers, like ex-teachers, really attend those reunions as well? That's pretty cool. I'd like to meet some of my old teachers. I mean, like the cool ones that, made their classes easy to get A's in. Anyway, I'm on a tangent. Let's move on. Story 17. Our reunion was going pretty well. This one group of outcasts who had a rougher time in high school turned out to have done just fine afterward. What followed couldn't have been further from the truth. One guy from the group, who we had all assumed was gay, got drunk and confessed that he only pretended to be gay to try and sleep with the wife of the guy that slept with his prom date way back when. Turns out it wasn't even him. It was the gay guy's best friend. He was better looking in high school, but had since gained a lot of weight. That friend got pissed at everyone and got everyone's drinking tickets confiscated. A group of guys got pissed and hauled them off to the bathroom to give them wedgies or something, just like they did in high school. One member of their group had since become a priest and tried to distance himself from the group, but got caught stealing everyone's jewelry. They all ended up getting kicked out of the reunion. But then they made their way back in and took the mic from our MC and performed the strangest group dance, all drunk, with the one fat friend ripping off his own shirt and screaming. That pretty much killed the party, and everyone left shortly afterwards. There were broken beer bottles all over the parking lot from the group. Story 18. Was forced to leave a McDonald's and was almost arrested under suspicion of being a terrorist. I was attending my 20th high school reunion with my, at the time, girlfriend. I apparently am a person of color. Never really crossed my mind until everyone decided to make that a thing, and my girlfriend was Persian and dark-complected. We had driven about 120 miles to get to the reunion in my hometown and stopped into a McDonald's before we got there. I needed to change clothes into something a little less comfortable, while she waited in the lobby and ate whatever American food was to her liking. Well, apparently, an Iranian woman can't just sit in the lobby and have a Big Mac or chicken nuggets or whatever without raising an eyebrow or two. And her darkish-complected boyfriend can't walk into a bathroom with a suit and spend 10 minutes or so changing into clothes without literally being told to leave by the kid with the shift manager hat on. We were told to leave, but they'd called the police and reported me/us as suspected terrorists because I must have exceeded the bathroom time limit while being the wrong shade of brown. They literally thought I was putting a bomb in the bathroom to blow up the restaurant. I thought it was the funniest thing I'd ever heard. My girlfriend and I had actually only been back in the US a few weeks from deployment in Afghanistan. Yes, as the good guys. Although I suppose that's subjective to one's point of view now. So I found it to be especially ironic. But the real kicker for me was that it wasn't just any McDonald's. This was the McDonald's that I actually used to work at many moons ago. It was my first real job, other than a paper route. I literally used to work there, and they kicked me out. We were still in town the next day, so I had a little chat with the store manager about it. I wasn't even pissed, but it was the principle of the matter. At least it made a good story at my reunion, which actually turned out to be pretty uneventful in itself. It's still a good story, though. Story 19. Classmate who was a sales rep in the pharmaceutical field, we'll call her Sally, showed up at our 30-year event. Started drinking heavily, and then she started acting very bizarre. Same reunion, another classmate, call her Jill, showed up for the first time since graduation. Turns out, Jill has been reluctant to come to the events as she was afraid Sally might show, and Sally bullied her in high school and caused a breakup with her then-boyfriend, who was also there with his wife. We'll call him Chuck. By the way, Chuck is a somewhat famous baseball player. Some of our group did really well. Turns out, Sally isn't so much a sales rep as she is an abuser of pharmaceuticals, and mixing them with alcohol gave her the courage to confront Jill in tears, throwing herself at Jill and saying how Jill was a female dog for loving Chuck when Sally was obviously the better choice back then, but now Sally thinks that they should be best friends instead. So will Jill forgive her and let Sally move in because she lost her lease? Yeah. Jill turned around and left the reunion and hasn't been to an event since. Chuck was there for the start of the speech and quickly grabbed his wife and moved to another part of the crowd. I found Sally passed out in the women's restroom later that evening and had to oversee getting her home to safety as I'm one of the reunion coordinators. Her 40th is coming up soon. Story 20. Nothing. I mostly met a bunch of people I didn't remember, and a few people whose faces I recognized, but literally couldn't tell you a single thing about them or if we ever had a single conversation. Then, on the 100% stone-cold sober drive home, a drunk driver rear-ended us on the highway going 80 mph. I got control of the car and pulled over. Then the other car sped off. A third car apparently saw what happened and zoomed past us in pursuit of the DUI hit and run. By the time I was able to make sure my then-girlfriend, now wife, was okay and call the police, they had already arrested the other driver. My father's car was totaled. The state pressed charges. It was his 5th DUI. I showed up in court at 8 a.m., 2 hours away from where I lived, as a witness. Couldn't find the case number on the schedule. Apparently, the defense attorney had requested a delay the day before at 4:55 p.m. He was supposed to call me, but obviously didn't, wasting my time. This happened 2 more times, causing me to travel 2 hours each way and miss work each additional time. The 4th date was during a long-awaited international trip. I decided it wasn't worth skipping the international trip to get ghosted again. Turns out, this one actually happened. The guy got off with a super light sentence, largely because I wasn't there as a witness. Worst high school reunion ever. Story 21. This occurred during my junior year in high school. I was close to one friend who had what was known as the party house. His parents would leave on business trips frequently, so it was a safe place to drink and crash. Well, one Friday night, we're having a party with close friends, about 25 to 30 people, nothing too big. It was a good time. It was the first night I tried a Four Loko, and never again will I. The next morning, we woke up to a strange smell throughout the house. Me and my buddy got up to check quickly, as it was a pretty foul smell. It literally woke us up from our deep, drunk sleep. We walk into the kitchen, nothing. Bathroom, nothing. Living room, nothing. Dining room, something. I get closer and realize it's a giant piece of poo. Automatic gag reflex and many questions filled my mind. Who did this? Why? Why did they do this? Why does it smell like this? I couldn't get the answer by just standing there and smelling the poo, so I had to wake people up. I woke up the entire household by blasting the Dora the Explorer theme song through my friend's old boombox. As people began getting up and pouring into the living meeting room, I immediately began asking people who created the feces on the ground. Nobody fessed up to anything, as I assumed would happen. All of a sudden, a girl who I've never seen before emerges from the basement. She looked rough, had some very weird clothes with platinum hair, looked young in the eyes but physically did not. Most of us noticed her, so we began observing and asking who she is and what she's doing here, etc. The typical things you ask an intruder. She looks up at me, then looks at the girls, and then goes into the dining room. Me and my friend began to slowly follow her into the next room, but that was unfortunately cut short. She comes back into the living room with the poo in one hand, holding it like it's a banana. She points at me and my friend, whose house it was, assuming she knew who we were, and yells, "Thanks!" and shuffles very quickly to the door. We all stood there in awe, not understanding what has occurred the past night or in these past 10 minutes. Till this day, we do not know who that woman was or where she came from or how she got into the house. All in all, shout out to Platinum Hair Girl Woman. I wish to be as fearless as your poo-handling self was/is. Story 22. I should start by saying that our boys' swim team, which I was a part of, and the girls' swim team were very comfortable with each other the year I graduated. I'm pretty sure every girl in the team had seen every boy naked more than 20 times, as almost all of them took to hanging out in the boys' locker room after meets. The coach was retiring that year, so he gave no F's what we did. The other way around was mostly true as well, as almost half the girls graduating with me tried showering with us at least once or twice. So that year, my team captain threw a graduation party for us at his parents' house, and once the weed and drinks came out, we all kind of made ourselves extra comfortable in the backyard pool. Now, this party was originally just for the swim team, but eventually more students started showing up and making their way to the backyard to ogle the girls. Some of them were pretty popular. Once we figured out we were being watched, most of us covered up, and eventually settled into a regular high school party. 10 years later, a reunion was planned, but it never happened. The swim team got together every Christmas anyway for an alumni meet, so a few of us decided to go to the team captain's house for an unofficial reunion party. This time, we were all very drunk, very hot 26 to 27-year-olds, trying to hold on to our glory days. And this time, nobody came who we didn't know. Things got out of hand. I was married at this time, and my wife and I left before the party got too wild, but we heard all about it the next day. 10 years later, a semi-formal 20-year reunion took place in a very fancy hall. One guy who had gotten very successful paid for almost everything. While we were all eating and talking and having a good night, this girl came bursting in like she had a mission. Starts going on and on about how everyone treated her terrible in high school and how she didn't get an invite to the reunion. It went out to everyone on Facebook and tickets were available to buy for almost a year before the event, and how she didn't get an invite to the party 10 years ago either. At that point, everyone is confused. She goes on to say that she wasn't invited to the graduation party even though she lived right next door. Now, we on the swim team start looking at each other like, does she think our party was an official school party? No one was invited to that. It just kind of came together. Then she pulls a bunch of papers out of her bag and starts going from table to table, hurling the loose printer pages onto each table. When she gets to our table, we can see that there are pictures from both parties that she took of us from her window. I guess she was trying to embarrass us. She was promptly thrown out and someone gathered all the papers. I'm sure a few managed to escape and threw them out. Then suddenly everyone started laughing about it. We were all old a-holes at that point, coming up on our 40s. Most of us were overweight, if not in terrible shape, and suddenly someone shows up with naked pictures of when we were young, buff, and sexy. Not to mention, half the people at the reunion were at the original party, so it's not like this was some deviating bombshell. The pictures from the second party were much more embarrassing. Some of the people were married and acting not very married. But I think no one besides those of us who were there really caught on that these were from 2 different decades before the pictures were all collected. If they did catch on, no one mentioned it. All in all, it could have been much worse than it was. And I'm sure for some of the people who were caught cheating, it was. But for most of us, it was just another fun memory of being stupid and young. And really, isn't that what high school reunions are for? So it was pretty obvious from the get-go that this took place quite a long time ago, at least the original part of the boys and the girls showering in the same locker room. Where did you go to high school and when? Yeah, that's pretty kinky, even by 30 years ago standards. So, pretty cool story. Thanks for sharing. Story 23. More like WTF than just wrong thing in general at our 10-year reunion. Pertinent info. Smaller district in US Midwest. Something like 110 in our class. Maybe 15 black kids and just a handful of students of other ethnicities in the whole school of less than 500. Just a couple openly gay kids during school and a couple more came out after graduation in each class, it seemed like. Just the average small town here. So here we are, waiting at our 10-year reunion that only 20 people came to. I only went because my best friend from school begged me when her husband couldn't attend with her. I'm shooting the bull with about 6 of my buddies from school, one of which was openly gay at that point, but still closeted in high school. I'll call him Steven. Everybody knew he was gay when we were in school, even though he'd never said it, and it was never any kind of deal. During the conversation, Steven had his back to the door, and in walked one of the best-looking girls that we went to school with. Tall, blonde, and tan, with her black boyfriend. People were starting to say hi to the girl, and Steven turns around and sees the black boyfriend, and asks us, who brought the N-word? And he was stone cold sober, drinking straight Coca-Cola. Not that being drunk would make it any better. Never in 1,000 years would I dream of hearing those words coming out of that dude's mouth after knowing him my whole life. Or coming from any of us, really. Not just that type. My jaw hit the table, along with the other guys standing there. Then Steven just walked away like it was nothing. We were all just dumbfounded. Still blows my mind. This dude hid the fact that he was gay because he didn't want to face possible harassment. And I understand that. Please, no offense to anybody about anything in this post. And there he was, throwing racial slurs about a guy he knew nothing about, who'd never had a chance to cover up his blackness from the day he was born to avoid any problems his skin color might cause him in life. Unbelievable how people can be. Story 24. Okay, my turn. Although I wasn't there to directly witness this, hearing about it was almost more unbelievable. So my best friend in high school had a string of, let's say, interesting relationships. Both of his major high school girlfriends turned out to be lesbian after they decided to break up. Now, that's strange in of itself, but more strange is how this all led up to our 5-year high school reunion. In a short 5 years, one of the lesbian exes moved to the other side of the country, joined the military, and shortly became dishonorably discharged. Figures. The other, however, stuck around in her hometown and dated around. Well, in the months coming up to our graduation, we find out that both of my best friend's lesbian girlfriends had started dating each other. You can imagine all the crap talking they did about him as he had dumped both of them, and both breakups were pretty messy. Fast forward to our 5-year reunion, and it was a pretty good turnout, and everyone was having an okay, albeit awkward time. Turns out both lesbian ex-girlfriends come, and we were all shocked. My best friend and his exes are in the same room after not seeing each other for many years. It was someone's bright idea to have the reunion on Halloween night, so it was at this point that I dipped out and left for a rave, where I had planned to meet my best friend in a couple hours after he socialized with some more old friends. Not 2 hours later, while I'm rolling my chicken off on Molly, I get a text from him with a potato of his face all cut up and bruised, and all it said was, quote, "I'm going to be a little late to the party." I immediately call him in a shock and find out what could have happened at our harmless 5-year high school reunion. Turns out that the ex-girlfriend who was dishonorably discharged was upset at how poorly my friend treated her now current girlfriend when they were in a relationship. To get revenge, I guess, she thought it was appropriate to start a fist fight with him in the parking lot of the reunion as he was getting into an Uber to go to the rave. She came back behind him and tackled him to the ground, drop-kicked him, and proceeded to kick him while he was down. Cops were called and she drove away drunk. He came to the rave an hour later with the cuts and contusions to prove it. Months later, she was eventually caught and was given an assault charge. Gotta love high school drama that lasts 5 years later. Story 25. I was just thinking about this today. A few years ago, when the 20th reunion was coming up, I started getting messages on Facebook from people asking me if I was going. I didn't want to be there when I was in high school, have had recurring nightmares over the years, I never graduated, and had to go back the next day. And aside from family I went to school with, have literally only had contact with one person from high school. Needless to say, I have no plans to go. The messages were coming in from my friend, my family, and then random people who I was briefly acquainted with 2 decades ago. No, I never thought I was real popular in school because I treated it like prison. Did the absolute minimum and never spent a single second there I wasn't required by the state to do. I would kind of glance over the messages and then just respond with 1 or 2 word responses. I figured after the initial flurry, it would just stop. I was wrong. Evidently, I was a popular guy in high school and really effing good looking. I wish I'd known it then. I know this now because I started getting messages from a lot of girls I went to school with who, quote, just got divorced and wanted to catch up. A couple of them flat out said they wanted to do what they were too afraid to do in high school and F my brains out. I'm not bragging, but I really haven't changed much since high school. I'm going gray, but it's just like in spots in my beard and at the tips of my hair. I'm not bald. I'm about 2 pant sizes bigger, but I work in IT, so that'll probably change. I've never considered myself attractive, mostly because of what these same people said to me in elementary school. When the messages got weird, I decided to show my wife. Better I show her than she discover them and think I'm hiding something. She knew I had no intention of going to the reunion, and prior to this, she had actually been trying to change my mind. She had a completely different high school experience and still goes to every reunion and keeps up with high school friends. She asked my friend and his wife, who told her I was evidently more popular than I thought I was, and most of the girls had crushes on me at some point. My buddy was Mr. Popular in school, and like my wife kept up with those people. His wife was a year behind us, but confirmed the story. So because of the reunion, I found out what I believed about who I was in high school was completely in my own head. It changed absolutely nothing else. I didn't go to the reunion, didn't respond to the messages, and have no plans to ever go to my hometown or see my high school alums again. Family and my one friend excluded, of course. What's more, I'm no more confident about my physical appearance. I guess I was an ugly duckling, but I've avoided mirrors and pictures my whole life, and can't make myself believe anything else. I wasn't physically bullied. Honestly, I'm pretty strong and got in quite a few fights with bullies that tried, and by middle school, they just left me alone. But the words cut me very deeply, very early. Once I accepted that as my reality, I decided to make myself exceptional in other ways and have had a very interesting life. I found out something about reality from the reunion experience I had, and with so many young folks on Reddit, I thought it worth contributing. The reality you live in is painted heavily by your own insecurities. It's never as bad or good as you feel, but I hope you don't spend a second longer in that pit of depression and wanting to self-unalive thoughts than you have to. When I said I accepted my reality, I mean I'd been through some painful things and was clinically depressed. The emotional bullying at school made me hate school, and that probably opened the door that later tragedies walk through, but just like walking away from that place still ranks as a top 5 day of my life, your situations can change too. Don't consider permanent solutions to temporary problems. And delete Facebook, so overcome obstacles have a harder time coming back. Story 26. I went to my husband's 10-year reunion. 2 of his high school friends, a couple who both went there as well, rode with us. The party was being held in a venue on a golf course about an hour or so from our house. No one wanted to bother with staying overnight somewhere, and since it wasn't really my party, I volunteered to be DD. I went in knowing absolutely no one, aside from my husband and our 2 friends. I spent the next several hours feigning interest in ridiculous stories and reminiscent conversations I had nothing to do with, while also trying not to get visibly annoyed with everyone around me getting more and more drunk while I sipped on my beer. I had absolutely nothing in common with anyone at the party. They're all from a small town, and most of the attendees still live and work there. I grew up in the big city. I have never seen so much camo in one location at one time as I did that evening, and the amount of gay bashing, racial slurs, God and guns talk I overheard from these people made me want to punch myself in the face. To top it off, the party was complete with a party crasher, some random guy who was at least 10 years older than us. A group of alumni met him that day while they were out on the golf course. They invited him to the party, and he proceeded to get absolutely hammered. At one point, my husband and I were on the dance floor. When the song ended, he went to the bathroom. I took maybe 3 steps back towards our table when I was accosted by the extremely drunk party crasher guy. He mumbled something about, "Hey baby, you look lonely," and tried to grind on me in front of everyone. I pushed him away, but he only got the message when a few of my husband's classmates came up and dragged him away. The party lasted for about 5 hours. When the venue finally kicked us out, everyone decided to drop by the local bar for another drink. I was exhausted, sober, and since it was already 11 p.m., all I could think about was our hour-long drive home. But not wanting to ruin it for everyone else in my group, agreed to go out. That one drink, of course, turned into multiple. I don't think we got out of there until after 1 a.m. In a different situation, maybe one with less camo, and where I could also partake in the partying, I'd be able to have more fun. But really, it was one of the longest, more miserable evenings I've ever experienced. Story 27. My school has still not had a reunion. I graduated in 006. I think it's because we had some really scandalous crap happen during our tenure and people want to distance themselves. A girl, close friend of mine, was struck and killed by a speeding cop one night. Her mom died too, leaving her brother orphaned. The cop is still a cop as far as I know. She was like 15. A guy was shot in the abdominal aorta by a friend at a party. As the friend's story goes, the friend pointed his dad's gun at him to show him it wasn't loaded, and it turned out that it was. The partygoers were effed up on booze and coke and were too scared to call 911, so they drove their injured friend to the hospital, deposited him on the steps in Michigan winter, and left. He bled out there and was found later. The murderer spent a few years in jail, got out. I friended him on Facebook out of morbid curiosity. He seems quite without remorse, though I hope he is, and I just don't see it from my point of view. Benefit of the doubt. The deceased was around 16. Some kid, a freshman I think, unalived himself in the bathroom and his body was found there. A teacher had an affair with another teacher. A lot of drug busts happened during school hours and drug dogs frequented the hallways. I was clever enough to keep weed in my locker and was one of the ones caught red-handed, incidentally. There was other stuff, but I think we were all pretty happy to escape that place. It was a harsh lesson in mortality for us all. On a positive note, my graduating class produced Mark Ingram, who went on to become an NFL player of some note. Go Bobcats. Yeah, so I guess a Heisman Trophy winning running back and, future pro is makes up for having just a bunch of junkies wandering the halls? Yeah, no, I don't think so. That's terrible. Hate to see that so many people passed away and teachers having affairs and stuff. What a mess. Story 28. Went to a high school reunion in a small town in New Mexico. Lived in the town, but graduated from a different high school. Reunion was in a hotel conference room. Dark, but had light show and a local DJ. DJ was super drunk, and the volume of the music was so loud no one could hear each other, not even shouting into the other person's ear, so almost everyone ended up standing out in the hall to chat. About an hour after we arrived, a woman shows up with a baby carrier with a baby strapped in and walks up to the DJ and begins arguing loudly enough to be overheard by even the blaring music. After a pretty heated shouting match, the woman takes off, leaving the baby on the DJ table. People are curious about the exchange, but hey, New Mexico, am I right? But then, just as things are settling back down, the DJ proceeds to projectile vomit all over his equipment, the speakers, and the drinks table. Cue mass exodus of the room. Someone did grab the baby, we're not monsters, and a few sympathy spewers add to the digestive carnage. So that pretty much ended the entire evening right there. We all just kinda shrugged and said, yep, pretty on par with an evening in small town New Mexico, and headed home. Story 29. My 10-year reunion was a few years ago, and my friends and I, watching the chaos unfold on Facebook, provided us with endless hours of amusement. None of us was able to go anyways, so this was just pure schadenfreude on our part. First of all, the people organizing it totally missed the mark. Originally, it was going to be a two-parter. The first part was going to be a Saturday night bay cruise about an hour north of us for our top 100 people. Personally, being trapped on a boat with a bunch of people who were a-holes to me in high school didn't appeal. But what I thought was just the most ridiculous icing on the cake was that the next day they wanted us to drive, hungover I assume, for the family-friendly part of the reunion and attend a Major League Baseball game as a group. Then, when people started asking basic questions, how are we going to spread the word to people who don't use Facebook? The group page proved very clearly that they hadn't matured in the intervening decade. The former popular kids immediately started harassing and bullying kids for asking basic logistical questions, and of course everyone started fighting. So, when the hosts weren't stopping the drama, everyone turned on them. Eventually, they tearfully stepped down because people weren't appreciating the hard work being done to make this event special. Another kid who had absolutely nothing to do with the event took over, and there was a barbecue in a park where about 15 people showed up. We graduated in a class of over 400. I'm so glad I didn't go, and I probably won't go to the next one either. Story 30. Not an incident at the reunion, but part of it and its planning. 10-year reunion was headed by the class. I forget what he was called, but the kid that got to do the announcements over the intercom every day, basically like the head in charge of the student council and whatnot. Anyway, he was in charge of organizing the reunion, and it went really bad. He used Facebook as his method of contact. Apparently, only the preppy kids got invites for the most part. I was far from considered preppy, but I got an invite, so I don't know. I think it was more a matter of if you were on his friends list on Facebook, you got an invite. He then created 2 different gatherings. A family-friendly, bring your kids, meet up at the high school, then an adults-only night gathering for dinner and drinks at some fancy place downtown. The venue was a rooftop scenery with a pool. It looked like the type of thing you'd dress in a suit for. The buy-in was $100 and it came with 1 drink. You would have to pay for more. 99% of our class didn't attend because either A, they couldn't justify the $100 to spend, or B, they didn't get an invite, and it caused massive outrage. Personally, I think he shot too high and alienated everyone who didn't reach upper middle class or higher status thanks to that $100 entry fee. I didn't go because I couldn't justify spending $100 to see a bunch of people I haven't kept in touch with for the last decade, and in turn likely didn't care much about. We weren't rich kids. It wasn't a wealthy school district. Not sure why we didn't just meet at a park with beer and barbecue. Anyway, the reunion picture suggested under 50 people attended. A lot of people were pissed, and it caused quite an argument for a while. That was fun to read. Some of the kids that didn't go and or weren't invited took it upon themselves to create an unofficial reunion at some local park venue. Everyone was invited. You were told to invite anyone you want, BYOB, there'll be free barbecue, donate if you can, bring swim trunks because there's a lake, and a couple of the old high school bands put on a show. I didn't go to this one either, but it sounded much better in my opinion. Story 31. Well, this is going to get buried, but oh well, might as well tell all. I didn't exactly attend this party, but, well, as you're about to find out, I technically did. I work as a police officer in the UK. At the time, I was 19 years old and 4 months into my service. I was enjoying the job, but I had always kept a low profile in school about what I wanted to do, only telling a few people who were mostly close friends and teachers about my career intentions. I was invited to a 1-year anniversary meetup, which was planned over Facebook by several of the lead students of our year of school. The event would start up with a formal meetup, but there would be post-drinking at nearby pubs if people were interested. Several of my close friends were going, but I didn't really want to go because, well, I had a bad time in high school and didn't want to bring back old memories. I had a perfect excuse to get out of it. I swapped a shift with a colleague who needed to swap for the day of the reunion. I would be working a night shift, 10 p.m. to 7 a.m., instead of going to this reunion event. It was a very busy Friday night, I remember. A huge number of calls coming, mostly for pub fights and drunken disorderly behavior. We were asked by my sergeant to go and do a semi-urgent errand for him due to an arrest made earlier on that day. We agreed and drove down to do the errand. On the way, we were stuck in traffic as usual when suddenly a call comes in that there's been a stabbing outside a pub only 2 streets away from our location. We immediately hit the blues and drive to the location. We arrive and go into the pub, and as we get there, we find the victim was dragged into the pub by the bar staff after being stabbed outside. Some random old dude I didn't know. We start providing initial first aid as police, but the paramedics arrived a few moments later. Other officers also arrive. As I walk over to the bar to speak to the pub manager, I suddenly hear my name called out. Wait, that's Bloonin' Nation! This isn't my colleague or some other officer. I turn to see about 40 people who all used to go to my school, and quite a few I certainly didn't get on with back in school. Crap, I think. Now several of them are coming up to me and asking me about what happened. How am I? And also stating they're surprised I'm a copper. The next 10 minutes were some of the most awkward moments of my life. The pub had to close as it was now a crime scene. I had to tell all the patrons in the pub they would have to leave and explain to them what had happened. That included the ex-school people. Telling people who you did not get on with as a position of authority is a very awkward thing to do. However, I persuaded them all to leave and go to another place to drink. I also had to do this with blood from the victim still on my hands. What was worse was after, on the way back to the station to do paperwork, my colleague in the car couldn't stop talking about it. He found it effing hilarious, the whole thing. I had never talked about my age openly, as I never wanted to come across as young, but now they all knew I was a 19-year-old baby. When I got home on Facebook, I had about 10 to 12 messages from several of these ex-school people. Some were from people I had known well, but others I had never spoken to in my life. Many of the messages I had received were just people wishing me well and hoping everything was okay after what had happened. I did get a few rude messages from some less desirable people I went to school with. I still speak to one or two of these people from school on a semi-regular basis. Story 32. My 20 was actually a mixed bag. Hung out with some of my good friends and had a great time, except for one absolutely infuriating experience. To set things up a bit, I was kind of the quiet, freaks and geeks type during high school, but within my group of friends, I was pretty gregarious, and a bit of a wild, impulsive guy who was really active with extracurriculars. I was a columnist for the school paper, was in choir and several sports, and I did all the musical and theater stuff I could when I was in school. I wouldn't say I was popular, but I was a bit of a scoundrel. My wife's descriptor, not mine, within the aforementioned freaks and geeks crowd. Most everybody else just knew me as a quiet and nice guy. I really came out of my shell, though, after high school, and became much more social and confident in general. So I'm being my normal, post-high school talkative self. I start chatting up two guys I was on the cross-country team with. They were both pretty popular, honor roll type guys in high school who, all told, I did happen to get along with for the most part. As I was talking with them, I realized they had both become stuck-up douche nozzles. It was so bad. I was half expecting them to ask why loser me was talking to them. I had been dropped into an 80s high school comedy where I was the John Cryer character talking about abuse from the antagonistic jock/popular kids. As soon as I realized what was going on, I noped out, told Matt and Lil Bubby see ya, and walked off. I have little tolerance for elitist a-holes, especially nowadays. It was a shame, too, as they were both fairly nice guys when I was in school with them. I even mentioned it to a good friend who got along with them great in high school, as I was thinking that just maybe I misread the situation. My buddy agreed with me that they had become Trump-level elitist jerks over the years. Story 33. My tenure, most recent, was actually very low-key and enjoyable. It all took place in the gym of our high school, so really no venue issues. There was music from our graduating year being played in the background, light snacks being served, and was surprisingly well attended. Nothing fancy, no frills, just some tables and nachos in a familiar place with familiar people. Simple. At some point near the end of the event, one of the guys who had been popular and on the football team grabs the mic and starts making a speech. This was one of those guys who had already been worked over by life since graduation, and you could tell he had a few screws loose as a result. He proceeds to go on a profanity-laden rant about a list of things in front of everyone there and the many families and children that were in attendance. It was at least 15 very awkward minutes before someone finally got up and asked him to sit down. I don't know if everyone just felt bad for him or just honestly didn't know how to handle someone who had taken it upon themselves to hold an impromptu conspiracy theory seminar at their high school reunion. Didn't by any means ruin the night, but was definitely an odd thing to have happen at a gathering where alcohol wasn't even being served. Story 34. I went to our first one last year. The worst thing that happened is some people didn't show up. It was still a good crowd, but there were some people who were in the area that didn't show up. Organizers made it go without a hitch from what I remember. Original planning was rocky because planner overestimated how much funding she will get, but at the actual event it was fine. I had a crush on this one girl in middle school. We did see each other at the reunion. She mostly forgot about it, and she mostly forgot about me, I'd assume. She was engaged at the time. We had a very friendly conversation. Her fiancé's a cool guy. All three of us work in the same industry. What's funny is that we talked for a few hours, and I think we talked more at that reunion than we did during the 7 years we went to the same school. She and I went to middle school and high school together, although we weren't in the same clique or group. I never brought up middle school because I was just a kid going through puberty. We had a good conversation that in the very unlikely scenario we happened to see each other at times outside the reunion, we'd probably have friendly chats. In the very, very unlikely scenario that we work at the same company, I can definitely see a friendship form there. Don't get me wrong, this isn't me trying to salvage anything or do anything. She's engaged, and I also don't date folks in the industry, and girls who are in a relationship, be it boyfriend or girlfriend, engaged or married, I don't mess with that crap. I'm just saying, I can see a friendship, just a friendship. Story 35. Not me, but my sister. She wasn't even invited to her reunion. She has to go as one of her her friends guess. She thought maybe it was a mistake. Turns out it wasn't. Several people ignored her. Others glared at her. Some were like, "Oh, yeah, I remember you." And some were, "Did you even go to this school?" I can tell you why she wasn't invited in 2 words. Debate team. The clubs all had little reunions that had displays with pictures of their accomplishments and the like, except for one, debate. Not a single member of the debate team was invited to the reunion. My sister only met one person who was on the debate team, and, like her, he wasn't invited and had to go as a guest. Then it finally made sense to my sister. The last 10 years. Why her boyfriend didn't receive an invitation to his reunion. He was also on debate. Why so many of her classmates had her blocked on Facebook, including a few teachers. Why the debate team didn't have an entry in the yearbook table of contents and just had a hastily put together page with one picture. And one of the reasons why the valedictorian was booed at the graduation, and why he also wasn't invited. I say one of because it was super competitive that year. There were accusations of plagiarism, nepotism, and other things. They invited the stoner who was in jail for Grand Theft Auto, but not the debate team. Half of me wanted to just smile ear to ear because the debate team were a group of total F-heads in high school, and my sister had just quit coaching debate for that very reason. The other half of me wanted to say, wow, that is crappy. Story 36. Honestly, had a really great graduating class. We all, for the most part, got along, and those that didn't were civil. Had a blast. Organized by 2 people, but they used land on a farm, one of their family-owned, organized catering, BYOB, and even got tents and some porta-johns, and everyone got invited, popular or not. Small town high school as well, so naturally very close-knit. The worst part was a few individuals, but it made me really reflect on how far a bunch of us got. Had more than a few cats who fell into the never left my small hometown crowd, happy with what they had but never really grew out of high school. Hell, one girl worked the same job she did in high school and proceeded to get piss drunk and crap on a few people for being fake because they had a real job, education, etc. A lot of fallen angels as well. People who everyone thought would conquer the world who ended up in dead-end jobs they hated or places they probably never saw themselves in. Content until they suddenly had to say what they were up to out loud. Spoke to more than a few long-lost friends who just seemed to shut down when I asked, "So, what are you up to?" One of my old buddies asked if I wanted to hook up in his drunken stupor. I'm straight, and he's married with a kid or two, the poor guy. That's not to say I was king crap of Turd Island at that point either, but it made me really appreciate what I had accomplished at that point in my life. My job and my education were 100% what I set out. It was weird to see how some people made it out okay, and some people got buried by life after. Sorry if ranty, late night Reddit. Story 37. My school had funds set aside for reunions, but they put the senior class president in charge of the funds for each year. Right after graduation, our class prez vanished off the face of the earth. Around 8 years after graduation, some people from my grad class actively started looking for him. We set up websites and Facebook pages to find him. Since he had the only access to the money, we needed him. We did not find a trace of him. At almost the 10-year mark, he suddenly shows up and is hired as the principal of the same school. He has a doctorate in some English category and demands everyone refer to him as doctor. When we start to approach him about making the 10-year reunion happen, he at first refuses to discuss it. After some pressure from more of the class, he finally says the budget was a rumor, and he straight up refused to have anything to do with the reunion at all. He wouldn't even acknowledge questions about it. He would just pretend you weren't talking. If he recognized you as a member of our graduation class, he would just walk away and refuse to talk to you. One day after this, my son comes home from school saying he got reprimanded for not referring to the principal as doctor. I told him if that ever happened again, tell the doctor that his father said he can refer to him as Dr. Jerkhead. He did wind up telling him that. When he did, the doctor asked who his father was. When my son told him, he just walked away and never said a word to my son again. Story 38. So far, we haven't officially had one. The 5-year reunion got canceled a few weeks out because the venue couldn't hold as many people as said were going to attend. Class president decided to hold it anyway, just as a drop-in style event. I honestly have no idea who went because my friend and I felt it was way too sketchy in the details to go see people we didn't like. Supposedly, someone is in the process of planning our 10-year reunion. Someone started planning it and created a Facebook group. Second person came along and said that the class president put them in charge of planning it. A third person said, "Why can't the student council be involved?" class president official put second person in charge, but went back on promises and plans made by the president, changing it to an alcohol event and saying that kids were no longer allowed. The kids part was specifically requested because we have a fair number of single parents or couples who otherwise wouldn't have childcare. Arguments started and people started bullying each other. Basically, anyone I actually gave a crap about from high school left the Facebook group. No one has actually been active on the group page since January 9th, which was the day all of the bullying and arguments started. The fundraiser only raised $50 from the person that started the fundraiser in the first place. Tickets to the reunion were supposedly going to be at least $60 a person, which a lot of people were saying they couldn't afford right now. A survey went out asking if anyone was planning on bringing a +1, but only included the options, yes, I'm bringing my spouse, or no, I'm single. It was a real crap show for like 3 days. Now no one cares. Story 39. The best parts were seeing what my classmates looked like and where they were with their lives after 20 years. It gave me a helpful comparison with my own life. The worst parts were, 1. So many classmates didn't attend because they had moved so far past their sentimental attachment to high school by this point in their lives. 2. The vibe of us all being attached by virtue of our common experience in high school was no longer there, so it felt more like attending a conference. 3. So much time had gone by that I couldn't tell most of my classmates from their spouses. The name tags were vital for knowing whom I'd actually gone to school with. 4. A memorial presentation on all our classmates who had died since graduation was meaningful, but the presenters had no information on the circumstances of their passings, which was frustrating. And 5. The booklet of biographical updates that we were all asked to contribute to was not printed in time for the reunion, and was never mailed to us afterward either, which was also frustrating. Ours was a 3-day event. I attended all the events. The same issues were present at all of them, and I was left feeling kinda depressed. It was a disappointment because I had been extremely active in high school and knew so many people, had so many friends, and had so much fun. It was sad for me to experience that weird disconnectedness that permeated the events. Our 10-year reunion had been phenomenal, so I'd been looking forward to a repeat of that. Still, I'm glad I went, or my curiosity would have been killing me otherwise. Story 40. I was in a band that was hired to perform at a 20-year reunion. A couple of the guys in the band were actually in that class, so I guess it made sense for the organizer to hire us, keeping it tight-knit and all. I knew none of these people aside from the guys in the band, but I wasn't going to say no to free food, money in my pocket, and booze. It was all going well with a really large turnout until my singer's brother showed up. He was hammered before he got there and proceeded to get even more hammered and make a complete ass of himself. In between songs, he could be heard hollering vulgar crap from a nearby table. Just being that guy. In between sets, he took it upon himself to grab one of the mics and say some rather classy things, or generally ramble nonsense before one of us turned off the PA. Then he starts hitting on my singer's wife and groping her while we're playing. My singer sees this and is shouting at him, off mic, in between lines, while a friend of the band is trying to pull the brother away from her. The wife was all but winding back a fist to sock him in the face at this point. This is totally causing a scene. The golden moment was while the organizer was announcing something on the mic, in between sets, the singer's brother grabs one of the backup mics and decides to rudely interrupt her in the form of "Shut the F up, you dumb female dog." The whole room was aghast, and it went quiet real quick. Organizer went into mom mode and scolded him like a child. A couple guys ended up throwing him out. Somehow he got back in and was causing more trouble. The same guys are having trouble getting him out again. The organizer is looking at my singer to do something about his drunk brother. My singer is just all like, "F this, call the cops, get him out of here. He's not going home with me." It's a total crap show at this point. We finally got him out of there, and he got home somehow. On top of that, another guy got thrown out for being a drunken buffoon. The funny thing is, that particular guy wasn't even in the graduating class, nor did he even go to that school. He was a friend of the band, whose wife was in the graduating class, and she didn't even show up to the reunion in the first place. With all of that, it certainly didn't look good on us. I guess the organizer wasn't too happy and chewed my guitar player out the next day when he met up with her to collect the check. Pretty sure we won't be getting called to do the next reunion. But F it. I got free food, some wild entertainment, and made some decent money. Story 41. I was invited to mine, but it was held at a house with a very large backyard and pool. It was actually going well. People were mingling, free drinks and food, and a pool in the middle of the summer. I even brought my swim trunks. I was awkward back in high school, so it was nice to talk to people that actually treat me well. Then, one of the guests decided he wanted to get all the attention and brought out a massive bong. Like, where did you hide that? And hid it. Then chugged an entire bottle of vodka. It was like the old teenager brain woke up inside him and told him he would be the life of the party if he did that. In less than 10 minutes, he went from an enjoyable person to be around to a complete jerk, then transformed once again into a mewling, vomiting baby. I mean, crawling on the ground, puking in the flower bed, screaming and crying about nonsense. I had already called for my Uber the second he began trying to get people to chug chant him on. As I was stepping into my Uber, the party host and the drunk guy's brother came out carrying the guy. They begged me to take him home. I looked at my Uber driver, who was already cringing at the idea. Nope, put him on the couch and give him water in a bucket. They said some choice words that reminded me why I don't hang out with people from high school. I didn't say much else, just nodded at the Uber driver to go. I wasn't going to let some rampaging manbaby ruin this Uber driver's car with his 10 years of post-high school adult failures. My Uber driver was a 20-something college student just trying to make a few bucks on the side and was very appreciative. Story 42. My 10-year was last year and it was a massive scam. There was money set aside for it from our high school, yet when the time came, the two classmates who were organizing it said there was no money and asked all of us to pay for it by RSVP directly into the classmates' private bank account. So they book a nice restaurant and use the banquet room. Conveniently, my wife has a second job working for the same people that own this restaurant and found out the details. So we were expected to pay $100 per person for the room. Spouses also have to pay $100 for themselves and no kids were allowed, and pay out of pocket for our own food and drinks. The room starts at $200 and gets cheaper if you order food and drinks. So all said and done, with the number of people attending, the room was less than $50 to rent for the night. They claimed the additional cost would be for live music, there wasn't any, and for decorations, maybe $50 worth of stuff from the dollar store. It was cheap decorations. They may have also rented it from a local event planner. I actually called them out in a public post in the Facebook group that was set up for the event and broke down the math and how the fees added up to over $6,000 in money that was unaccounted for. They tried to call me out for being, quote, too poor to afford $100, which absolutely made me laugh. Just because I didn't fall for their scam doesn't mean I can't afford it. So, all in all, the two people planning it pocketed thousands of dollars from the 70 to 80 people who went. The event was likely paid for by the school. Even if it wasn't, they still basically robbed people just for setting up this event, given how they did it. And I'm glad I chose to look at the pics on Facebook the next day rather than pay $300. Entry for my wife and I, plus food and drinks, for a lackluster evening filled with people I've forgotten about. Story 43. We had a semi-reunion party for New Year's Eve in 1999 to 2000. We were all on Christmas break from our first year at college, and we must have had about 200 people in the house. The girl who lived there's parents were out for the whole night. Also, the basement toilet was broken. This would become important later on. So it's the millennium. Everyone is hyped. We're a bunch of idiot 18, 19-year-olds looking to party. So we do. Everyone brings booze. Some people decide to get drunker faster, like pouring tequila into a Coors Light can and slamming it, repeatedly. That guy would go on to tackle the family Christmas tree out of the front door of the house later in the evening, and wrestling with it like a WWE match. The lights were still twinkling as it happened. He had to be taken to the hospital for his stomach to be pumped. It wasn't midnight yet. Anyways, we were all partying and getting crap-faced. Obviously, at some point, we need to relieve ourselves. Being a guy, I would just walk to the fence in her backyard and go for it. The girls had to use the single powder room on the first floor. The consumption accumulates, and we're all pretty effing hammered by 1 a.m., to the point that I vomited then. The basement bathroom, however, has now entered into play, despite the sign saying stay out. My memory got fuzzy from about that point, and I was taken home and passed out in the front foyer. But apparently not before telling everybody they could continue the party at my place. The next morning, I woke in my boxers, went to the TV room, and put on what I think was the Citrus Bowl or something. One of my buddies, however, had stayed overnight. Him and 3 other guys had crashed on couches in the living room. The parents came home at 10 a.m. that next morning to a scene of devastation. They were unenthused. The toilet in the basement had completely backed up and overflowed human waste products into the finished basement portion of the house. They screamed at the guys who were still there, who literally ran from the house without having car transport home. Effing wildest house party I ever attended. 10 out of 10, would attend again. Thanks, Moira. Story 44. Didn't go to my 5-year high school reunion, but I helped plan it. I barely kept in touch with anyone, and I wasn't planning on going until maybe the 10-year, until the planner created a subgroup of our class on Facebook of people she thought could help her out, myself included. She was organizing some planning meetings for us, and by the end of it all, I was the only one who was able to meet with her at a restaurant really fast after work. I felt really bad for her because she was already running her own business and trying to put the reunion together. Meanwhile, her best friends, who all still kept in touch and are super close-knit, couldn't spare time to help us plan. We got the basics mapped out, and she was going to branch out to contact others to help. When the night came, I ended up getting a stomach bug over the weekend, so I couldn't go. It was held in a restaurant owned by the family of one of our classmates, and attendance was decent. It didn't end well, though, seeing as the planner put all the money, about $300, that my class raised at a raffle that night in her purse to reimburse some of her expenses and send flowers to the family of a classmate who committed self-unaliving, and put her purse under a table while working on something at the party. Seeing as she left her purse unattended, all of the money was stolen. She posted on Facebook about it, asking for it to be returned, but I never heard if it was. Story 45. I hated my high school. I'd never go to any reunion. I was terribly treated, and I've let it known to others. I want nothing to do with my high school class. I just got bullied incessantly, and to add insult to injury, the bullying didn't stop when I left the high school. They would come by my house and egg our cars, kick in fenders, BB the sides of them, break windows. One time, I went to go out somewhere. I open our front door, and I'm immediately showered with glass from vandals breaking out the window in our front door. Okay, now I want to effing murder these people. I'm not even safe in my own home now. If I estimated, probably 40 individual acts of vandalism over 3 years. I remember February of 2001. There's a high school party in the street. I'm not invited to it, but that's cool. I'm playing GT2 on the PS1, and my mom is reading a book at 1 a.m. on a Sunday morning. And out of nowhere, a effing beer can goes through our windows, shatters it, and we feel massively violated. Of course the cops do F all. Our cops couldn't even catch a cold, let alone habitual criminals. Why are we paying taxes for policing services? Because you guys give us jack crap in return in terms of keeping my family safe. But later on, our cars got egged. We had cars up and down the block of partygoers, separate weekend from the beer can incident. We start writing down license plate numbers, but the cops tell us they're not going to do crap about all the underage drinking and vandals at the high school party up the street. So we have to start staying up late, monitoring our property whenever that hoodlum has a party, and he does it like every other weekend. What's funny is the last night I saw them, it was the post-graduation party, May of 2003, and we had this big raffle at the end, and it was like a $1,000 gift card for Gateway Computers. A couple classmates were extremely displeased I was the one who won it. The company went belly up like 1 year later. I cashed it in by that time, though. Bought a camcorder for myself, and my dad gave me money to buy himself a new printer. I don't want anything to do with those effing people. To this day, we're extremely careful about letting anyone know where our households are. None of that effing school buzzbook crap. If I ever had a kid, I'd live in a gated community and be willing to put up with the HOA before I let any of his friends come over, or know where our house is. Story 46. Oh, I have mine. So 2015, my 10 years coming up. I was getting all excited about it in 14 because I'd met this fantastic woman and wanted to brag. See, I'm now pretty great sort of thing. So early 2015, I haven't heard anything about it, but I see my cousin, who was in the same class, got an invite on Facebook and marked as interested. So me being salty that no one, not even my cousin, actually invited me, I decided I wasn't going, but I wanted to see the train wreck. The organizers were like, bear with me, this is 5 years ago. We want to rent out an Elks Lodge in the town, but we need 100 people to pay $50 per person to reserve the space and catering, and then another $50 for the actual event. So I see this and I'm like, holy crap, for me and my fiance to go, I'm looking at $200 just to see people who didn't even bother to invite me. Anyway, they failed to gather the money. They needed 100 people, and they got 10 to commit enough to put down $50. They hold on to the money for a while, promising to go back to the drawing board. 4 months later, the 10 people who did pay haven't seen their money back. The organizers eventually give it back, I want to say like 6 months after the initial deadline, and then say, okay, we're meeting at this brew pub at this time. Message here so we can make a reservation. Anyway, the day comes, I see like 2 people be like, that was fun, who took the group photo? The photo gets posted, and it's a group of like 7 people. Mind you, this is a class of 400. I was expecting a park-based potluck similar to my parents' 20th. I imagine that would have been much more enticing, but no one invited me, so F them. Story 47. Our high school reunion was at the school we graduated from. This reunion at school has been a tradition for over 50 years with the collaboration of the school's teachers. Over 100 people showed up. It's honestly a great event as some teachers are there and we revisit the school with them while they tell us well-kept stories and secrets about the place. Some people decided to use this situation to draw chickens on the classroom chalkboards. No cleaning staff were due to clean after us, so the kids found them the next Monday. Then, some dude found an unlocked locker and decided to put a threat message along with a beer can inside the locker. This was then brought to the direction by the kid. Also, a girl tried opening a fire emergency to smoke weed, which triggered the fire alarm, and the firemen had to drop by while we all waited outside. Finally, some teachers tried hitting on graduates. Needless to say, the tradition is now done. All in all, it was a success. Okay, was this like the 1-year reunion or something like this? Why is everybody still acting like delinquent teenagers, like drawing private parts on the chalkboard and putting beer cans in lockers and trying to bang students? What is wrong with you people? I certainly hope this wasn't like the 15 or 20 year and you guys are in your 30s doing this kind of stuff. Grow up. Story 48. So I didn't have a great time in high school. Didn't make too many close friends, and the ones I had I stuck with because of Facebook. So 5 years rolls around and I didn't go. I was shocked I was invited, but the class president was cool to me, and he was in charge of the reunion. I was out, with a few post-high school friends totally unaware that it was the same night as the reunion, so they decided to do a bar crawl and ended up at the dive bar I was at. Don't judge, it has a patio. This guy notices me and says hi. He was a high school bully, but a special kind because he was also part of the outcasts. So he was a dork like me and a bully. He was hammered, fall down drunk, and he starts close talking to me, talking about old times and making a point of saying, "Wow, you were a real loser in high school. You look really good now." And being drunk, he would repeat that. It didn't hurt my feelings, but it was interesting how he separated the two of us, though we were part of the same circle. But then the deliberate bully came out in a weird way. It came time for the reunion to move on, and so he's trying to pay and uses his card. When he signs the receipt, he drops his pen, looks me square in the eyes, and demands that I pick up his pen. I say no. Then he proceeds to call me a female dog and demands for me to pick up his pen. I again say no, and he starts taking an aggressive fight stance. Fortunately for me, maybe, I went to this bar a lot, and the bartender saw what was going down and signaled the bouncer to come over, and he broke it up before it got any farther. But the weird, sudden, and aggressive display of attempted domination was unreal, especially from a fellow dork. Anyway, he got into a car accident on the way home, had a hospital stay, fired from his job, and last I heard he works at a gas station. His previous job, he made about 3 times what he does now. He also found God? Weird guy. 10-year rolls around. I again didn't have much interest, so I didn't go. Another bar crawl, ends up at the same bar. I wasn't there this time, but I know someone who was. No car accidents that time. Apparently, it was a decent party. Any drama my friend was not privy to. I don't regret not going. Story 49. Some context to begin with. I come from a small town with a population of 5,000 people. Everyone at my age knows everyone that's more or less in their age. We throw a reunion party every 2 years or so. I've had a stroke of bad luck attending them for the last decade. I went through depression during 2017 because I felt excluded in my hometown every time I came back. Easter, summer, and Christmas, because I felt nobody wanted me there. I ended up cutting my relationship with almost all my high school classmates after 2018. Here's why. 2011, my 2 closest friends, who are still my 2 closest friends by the way, let's call them Mike and Paul, and some of my other classmates got mad at each other for some pretty serious stuff, and I was caught in the crossfire. I decided not to attend any of the 2 separate reunions they organized that year to remain on neutral ground. They're still on bad terms as of today. 2012, my grandma fell down the stairs and we had to rush her to hospital. She's fine now. 2014, I was studying in Canada. I'm Spanish. Here comes the juicy bit. 2016, no one invites me, and September, the month we usually chose to throw the party, goes by without me noticing. I call some of my classmates, and they tell me they did not know anything. 2018 comes by and I make sure I can attend this time. I even help organizing stuff and cook most of the dishes for dinner. I had to push real hard for them to let me do this, and I did not understand why. The day comes, the party goes on for 2 to 3 hours without any noticeable highs or lows. Everything is fine. 11 p.m., some drunk-ass party members start complaining about how this party was crap, comparing it to the last one 2 years ago. Perplexed by this, I start asking around, and I come to the conclusion the entire group ghosted me, thinking I was on the other side of the fence in regards to what happened in 2011 with Mike and Paul, and that I had been making excuses for an entire decade not to attend and save face. This did not make me mad per se. It was almost understandable for some of the people there to think that. They only talk to me once every 2 years by WhatsApp to plan the parties. What made me mad was there were a lot of people in that reunion that did know I was telling the truth every year that went by but did not correct anyone. I confronted them about that and they ignored me or outright told me they did not think of me as a friend, but as somebody they could get help from about technology-related stuff whenever they needed it for free and nothing else. That they did not seem to care. To add insult to injury, later some of the guys who did not know I was being sincere the whole time told me the entire group was also avoiding me every single time I told anybody to meet up, go to a bar, or anything really. So the combination of poorly timed events, a discussion between some friends I was not a part of, and some greedy mother effers pulling strings made me go through a depression and made me feel excluded from my hometown, ending with one of the worst parties I've ever been to. F reunion parties. Just make sure you meet up with your true friends more often. Story 50. So I was class prez and the one who started planning the thing, right? But it was obvious that this one girl was going through some stuff and needed to work through it. So she was trying to take control of planning and being an underfoot figure whenever I did anything. So I let her take over most of the conversation. Reunion rolls around and this big gig I had in LA bailed, so I didn't have a flight there. They end up FaceTiming me in, which was chill until my boyfriend called in. He ends up wasting my whole night, 2 hours, so I didn't even get to talk to my boyfriend that night, and hijacks the night trying to prove that I'm not bi. I'm either gay or straight, and she won't give up on that, even though I'm pan, and that I'm autistic. I'm not. I'm just maladjusted and have a brain injury. These are my 2 triggers, so worst nightmare status. Like, I even hang up several times and they keep calling back for 2 hours. She ended up running into me when flying out of state about a month ago and pulling the exact same crap in public and hijacking another day of my life. On the bright side, I'm no longer worried about my classmates' opinions of me anymore. Shrug. Story 51. Not a high school reunion, but my grade school was being closed down a few years ago, so some women from my kindergarten class decided to do a reunion for our group. I was raring to go to this thing. It was a few months after I was married and wanted people to meet my wife. A few days beforehand, I was told my fraternal twin brother might be coming. Now, my brother and I have not spoken in several years, even longer story, and I didn't want the whole thing to devolve into a crap show because of us. I was told one of the organizers wouldn't be going, but she begged me to come. She and I have become tight over the last few years. She said my brother wouldn't be allowed in. My wife and I show up, have a good time, and the best part was the women who attended were happy my brother didn't show, but some of the guys were disappointed. We were leaving early the next day, so we ducked out by midnight to find out my brother did show up, didn't buy a ticket, already drunk and left with one of the women from our class. The kicker? He was staying at my parents' house. We were at a hotel with his live-in girlfriend. Story 53. I went to my reunion with my friends and my sister. They were kind of losers in high school, but I was always cooler, so I used to hang out with the cool kids. But to make them feel better, I'd hang out with them under the bleachers or something. It's not that important. Anyways, we get there and we find out the guy who bullied my sister and my 2 buddies is there. And he immediately comes over and starts rehashing things, calling my friends awful things like Dirt Grub and Ronnie the Rat, and whatever mean names they came up with back in high school. And my sister, who was constantly bullied by this guy for her bad back growing up, decided to start laughing at them and making fun of them alongside the guy. She kept saying she was doing it for them and she was going to get back at the guy, but all she really did was make a lot of mean jokes. I decided to just grab a table and let my friends come to me. The weird thing is, no one came to hang out with me, so I decided to move to the dance floor and maybe find some of my old friends there when I see him. Tim effing Murphy. This kid was my best friend in high school until he went behind my back and slept with my prom date. He came up and tried to act like nothing had happened, and invited me to hang out with him, but I could tell he was just trying to rub salt in the wound. I decided to get back at him for banging my prom date by trying to sleep with his wife, but after 20 minutes of seduction, she tells me she thought I was gay and leaves. I know what you're thinking. I was being creepy or not seductive or something, but that's bullcrap. I have a system that totally works. Anyway, my friends come over to me and tell me they're trying to find a way to get back at their old bully. They look really rough. I'm guessing the bully and his friends cornered them in the bathroom and roughed them up. They even hurt my sister so bad they messed up her back. Luckily, we had her old brace in the back. Anyway, I knew they needed my help, so all pissed off and revved up, we decided to confront them all and fight it out right then and there. It's here when I found out Tim Murphy never actually banged my prom date. It was actually one of my friends the whole time, and Tim Murphy and this bully started telling me I wasn't actually cool in high school. They said I was some a-hole who thought he was better than everyone, but it was true. I was better than everyone. I was a golden god and they were my minions. Anyway, we decided to get back at them with a great dance routine to the song Freedom by George Michael. Story 54. I was taken out of school and ended up in Borstal, UK prison for delinquency. Long story short, I got my act together, went to night school for 10 years. Got 2 degrees and a great series of jobs. 20 years later, my mom tells me my class is having a reunion. I'm living 200 miles south by now, but can arrange my diary to attend. I duly turn up at the social club near to my old school. Except by now, I've chauffeured Mercedes. I'm wearing a €2,000 suit and an appropriate watch. I took the watch and jacket off and put on a sports coat so as not to be overdressed. I asked my driver to wait outside and said I would be out by 10 as we had a 3-hour drive home. Like all reunions, some people had done well, some had not changed their life one jot. A lot of people were commenting on the big car outside and convinced themselves it belonged to the bookmakers next door. When asked what I did, I just said I worked in construction, which is true, and most of the other boys were carpenters and masons, so it wasn't seen as unusual. The truth was, by this time, I'm the CEO of one of the largest construction companies in the country. Everything is going okay until 9:55 when my driver opens the doors to the room and he's wearing his cap and gloves and in his finest voice shouts my name and tells the room that it's time to leave. You could hear a pin drop, and my old class parted like the Red Sea as I said, "See you folks," and walked out in total embarrassment. The driver laughed all the way home, and I still smile at the ridiculousness of the evening. My mother still meets old female classmates who still, 10 years later, are asking for my number.